Hello, you are listening to the Curator Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 1. An interview with Joe from the band FOES. So we're here in a lovely Wetherspoons pub.
We are.
Joe, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you, very well.
Back in Glasgow, you guys are often in Glasgow?
We are, yeah, it's like we keep, on social media, we always call it kind of our home away from home. It's somewhere where we've always had a really good experience and a really positive reaction whenever we've played. We try to include it on all our longer UK runs, and we're hoping tonight's no different. We're excited because obviously now the album's out, and just interested to see what sort of response comes in and how it differs from previous tours we've done.
Well, I actually really like Liverpool. I think Glasgow and Liverpool are quite similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, not to put Liverpool on the fire, but I think Glasgow currently has a better scene for the kind of thing that we're doing. Liverpool's great because obviously it's where we've all been based and where we met and put the band together and everything. But Liverpool's great for kind of its own reasons and more sentimental reasons. And Glasgow's somewhere we really look forward to coming to. And there are definitely similarities there, I think, in terms of the kind of attitude and the sort of people. But yeah, there's also those differences as well.
So, like you just said, the album's come out, The Summit Lies Skywards. You guys been working up to that for a while?
We have, yeah. I mean, we spent a year, if not more, writing it really, because we kind of hatched the idea for an album and wrote 3 tracks for it, one of which didn't actually end up on the album. We put out as a B-side via the Monolith. But that's when we started. We didn't want to kind of put the album out unless we had a platform for it. So we recorded that sampler with 3 of the songs we'd written and started firing it out to a few labels. And that's when Basic came on board. And then knowing Basic were behind us, we're right now there's a reason to put an album out. So it was then we spent that year writing and recording the rest of it. So yeah, there's been a lot of work that's gone into it.
What was it like when Basic came calling?
It's great. They're such a good label. They're really hands-on, and Barley who owns it is a very nice guy, and you can tell he cares about the whole roster a great deal. They've been really helpful in getting the album out. Like I say, we wanted a reason to put the album out, and Basic have been that reason in a way. And I think that the direction they're going in as a label is great as well, because they're really starting to kind of diversify, and I think it's a really interesting time for them, and we're just pleased to be a part of that.
I mean, you guys have been kicking about for a little while, and it must have been good to kind of be oh, holy shit, this is actually becoming a thing. Yeah,
the year, it couldn't have come along at a better time, the whole sort of hatching the whole album plan, because the year before we had quite a quiet sort of, without going into too much detail, we had sort of a difficult year as a band. It was quite quiet, not a lot going on. But the whole album plan just sort of turned it around really. We were best case scenario, we do find a label that really cares about us. And before that we'd put 2 EPs out. One of those was with a really good label our friend Tom runs, called Crooked Noise. But we just needed to know the way the band was going down a particular direction, and obviously recent developments allowed for that. And it's been, the album in a way is kind of the culmination of the 3 years we have been FOES. So yeah.
I mean, you can notice if you listen to your stuff, obviously you've been maturing sonically, shall we say, to put it in a kind of floaty way. Has it always been a conscious effort to drive your music in a specific kind of direction, or is it just whatever comes out?
Do you know what? I think because right at the very, very beginning, we didn't do anything publicly for the first 8 months. We spent all that time writing and recording and figuring out what we wanted the band to sound like. And I think with every release, I think we've sort of treated it release by release, because Ophir, the first EP, was us finding our sound. Antecedents we kind of knew then, and we tried to refine it and make it more about a theme. And there was this loose kind of theme of royalty, very broadly a theme, but royalty and the kind of connotations of that. But with the album, I think a lot of people have said they've seen a much heavier side of us with the album, but we also think that our, at the opposite end of the spectrum, we've also got our softest moments on there as well. And I think time has allowed for us to think more and more about where the sound's going and develop it as such. So the album, how we wanted the album to be the culmination of that, and it feels like, to us personally, it feels like it has been. And obviously we hope other people at least people who've listened to us for quite some time, we hope they hear that as well. So we've always been sort of mindful of what we want it to sound like.
It's interesting to you because having been in a process where I've written an album recently myself as well, the amount of I don't think many people understand the amount of actual thinking you need to do. Like it's fine to write a group of songs. You can write 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 songs, but actually making it a cohesive unit is. I don't think a lot of people do that when they write albums these days. Was that a concern going forward?
It was. That was always, it wasn't even something that was really discussed. I think that was something that immediately we were all on the same page about, that we, as you say, we wanted it to be a really cohesive body of work. Pretty much after that period where we wrote those 3 tracks as a sort of testing the waters, everything we approached with, right, we want, for example, like dynamically we know what we want the opening track on the album to sound like, and we know where we want the album to end up. And then there's the middle track on the album, From Stillness, is a perfect example of, we knew we wanted that to act as a segue between the 2 halves of this album. So in a kind of, it's more like kind of, the really almost like dated prog approach of a concept album, but we tried to incorporate that, but keeping some sort of sensibility about it as well. But we knew from start to finish we wanted it to feel like an album rather than, as you say, like just a collection of 6 or 7 songs.
I do enjoy the direction of the record. It does definitely have a cohesive flow, which I mean, like I said, I don't see a lot of it at the moment, so that's really, really good. What I was also wondering is, see, when it comes to, I hate putting it this way, so I'm going to put it a different way. It's about influences, right? But I wonder, when you guys were writing the record, were there any particular records that you were thinking of that you would like, kind of, not to sound like, but to be like?
I don't know how much it ended up being an influence on the album, but I always, when I was younger, when I was like 15, 16, I remember absolutely loving And the Glass-Handed Kites, the Mew album. And there's so many, like, for me, that's a perfect example of an album that is just absolutely seamless. And that kept coming into mind. Sonically, I don't think it really influenced the album, but just that I always like really loved and thought was a great idea. And I think if you look more closely at kind of our mutual influences as a band, like Oceanside and Carnival, there is that cohesiveness on their albums, and they're both album bands. Carnival with Sound Awake, that's such a cohesive collection of songs, and Oceanside with Frames and Everyone Into Position, we take a lot from those kind of bands, and I think that's what sort of factored into the shaping of the album as a cohesive body of work.
Let's switch gears for a second. Let's talk about you as a musician, right? One of the things this podcast always kind of does, and which I like doing, is the origin story. Yeah. We always talk about the genesis of Joe. At what point did you kind of go, holy shit, I'm going to make music?
Well, before I was like a guitarist, I started playing piano at age 5, and I was pretty young. My dad was a French horn player, and he was always very big in his music, so I grew up with that. So played piano from the age of 5, and was like more classically trained there. But then as I got into, as I was about 11 or 12, discovered the guitar and started giving that a go, and then started seriously thinking about, okay, this is actually what I want to do all the time. Like pretty much a couple of years later, when I was, early teens, like maybe 14 and maybe going into 15, but it's always been a part of my life. It's just, I think it slowly with age sort of honed in on exactly what I wanted to do with it.
I've been in a band for a wee while, about a year and a half now, and it's been really interesting because of the way we've been focusing on making music. But what I've been thinking about a lot lately is how they're feeling as I'm older in this band compared to the first ever music I made. And obviously I feel as though I've grown as a musician. But the feeling of making music, I think, has changed distinctly as I've grown older and as I've getting better at my instrument and being in better bands. How has that been for you? I mean, compared to FOES now and the first music you made, is there a noticeable difference in terms of the feeling that it gives you?
I think so, yeah. But do you know what? Like, I mean, for me personally as well, I think everyone has a lot of personal stock in the album. You know, everyone individually in the band holds a lot of personal stock in the album. But for me, it's like, even if I think back to, I mean, not including, you know, kind of terrible bands I was in when I was like 14, 15.
That would have been thrilling though, being in like when you first are in a band, you'll be a group of other guys, and you're like, holy shit, we're making sound together.
That's it. I mean, I'm just as, I like to think I'm just as enthusiastic as I was back then. Perhaps a little more worn down now, but that's kind of the nature of the industry, isn't it? But I even think back to a project I was in when I was 17 or 18, and I think in my head I was always trying to achieve that sound that we're now doing with FOES, because it's been a long time that I've sort of been into the progressive / post-rocky soundscape sort of guitar playing, and it's taken years to kind of know exactly what I wanted to do with that. And luckily the three other guys, you know, it just came together very organically. So for me personally, it's not just the 3 years we've been in FOES, it goes way, you know, it's like 10 years work, and that in that light, it feels all the more rewarding for finally having this album put together and it being something that we are really proud of.
It's almost like life work.
Yeah, in a way, like without going melodramatic on it. Yeah, it's like, it feels like it has been the, you know, when we released it, I said to someone, it's like, you know, this is something I've wanted to do since I was 11 years old, and yeah, it feels like a real milestone for us as the band and for me personally, and I think everyone in the band feels the same way. There's something individual to them that it feels like a real accomplishment. One
thing I also wonder is, now that you've written an album, is the future, and you're on Basic Records, is there a view of doing like FOES full time as like your professional kind of job?
We'd love to do that. Yeah, we're realistic in that we're still a very, like, in the scheme of things, we're still a very small band. I mean, we luckily have to spend far less money on the band than we did at first. You know, we were absolutely crippling ourselves financially at first, but, you know, slowly but surely, like, tours are making a bit more money, and, you know, like, we're in album year now, and that needs to be the backbone of everything we do over the next year to 18 months. And things like the festivals we've been on the past year, like Arctangent and Fort Fest, you know, they've really helped kind of grow our fan base. And I think as we you know, we're not expecting this like meteoric leap to just suddenly making a lot of money off FOES, but we're persistent, and we hope that, you know, there is some point down the line where we could see something in return from it. But I think at the end of the day, it's just about enjoying it and, like, you know, getting the most out of it while we can. So.
You also manage the band as well, so how does that, like, you're also the manager as well, is that right?
Yeah, I manage the band.
So how do those two things go together?
Do you know, it's tricky, like, sometimes there are harder lines to draw, because, you know, it's two really different roles, like being a band member and being a manager, but it's something I've just sort of adapted to over time. Like, I mean, I think more often than not now I tend to have my manager cap on over my band member cap, and sometimes, like, that's where, you know, the guys are good at kind of taking me down a peg. They're the best people at put downs in the world, so if ever I'm being too much of a dick, then they can tell me. But I think it's actually, I've kind of liked being able to keep everything close to the chest, and because I'm a self-professed control freak, and I like to oversee everything, and I think luckily I've really enjoyed being able to oversee every single aspect of what we've done in the past year, like, and in the lead up to the album. And so I think, you know, I'd almost recommend it to anyone who's got who even thinks they've got half a business mind and is playing in a band, is like, do it. I would recommend keeping it close to the chest for as long as you can, and only when you feel like, you know, you really need, like, the expertise of someone else or an outside party, then passing it on. But I feel that, like, early on in the band, you know, in the band's lifetime, we gave that control up too early, and that's what made us want to sort of take it back at a later date.
the reason I ask is because I kind of function in a similar role.
Okay.
And I actually hate it.
Hate it.
I
There
think
are times where I absolutely hate it. Like, there are days where I want to put my head through the wall, and with my size head, that's not going to be a problem. But yeah, I think it's just kind of finding a happy place sometimes and just rolling with that.
just I think the reason I enjoy it is because I don't really I don't mean this in a bad way, but I don't really trust anyone else to do it right. I don't just mean in the band. I'm sure the other guys in the band could do it if they had to.
Yeah.
But I get really suspect of people that have that kind of, I want to do this for other bands without you doing it really early in a band's life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, though, I mean, like, half the reason why it's been so comfortable for me to manage the band as well is the approach of the other guys as well. It's still just as much like a team effort, because a lot, like, all the important decisions in the band we still discuss as the four of us, and all the three of them are really, like, they're really tuned in. They know what's right for the band, and that's kind of, again, like, with our playing and our rehearsing, like, it's all quite organic how it comes together, and I feel like that with the discussions in the band as well and how we approach where we're going to go next. So that definitely, is a huge part of why managing the band myself is something that has been sustainable.
So where do you go next?
Where do we go next? Well, I mean, as I was saying before, I mean, the album needs to be the centre of what we're doing for the foreseeable future. But we've already had, like, very vague, but we have had chats about what we'd want to do with the next record. And I think for now it's more about kind of live development. We'd really like to start kind of moving up the tiers in terms of, like, the UK live scene, and Europe as well. Like, Europe's a big must for next year, because we're actually yet to go out to mainland Europe. All our touring so far has been UK, but we've got our eye on a few prospects, and there's a few things in the pipeline that will take us out to Europe next year. Just need to lock them in.
Joe, it's been a total pleasure talking to you. Going to wrap it up now. Is there anything you want to say to me, or anything you want to ask, or anything you want to say at all in general before we finish? No. I think I'll leave it there. I think that's everything. I've talked for too long. We could talk for another half hour, but I'm not going to expose you to that. Joe, thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. This episode was created, edited and produced by Mark Fraser. If you want some more information, please go to www.thecuratorpodcast.com, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast by hitting the subscribe button in the podcasting app that you're using. Until next time, bye-bye.